The night had the kind of quiet that felt unnatural, too still, too heavy, as if the city were holding its breath under the weight of something it sensed long before it happened. Los Angeles was blanketed in a low-hanging mist that blurred the street lamps into weak halos, dim and trembling like exhausted souls. Marilyn walked alone along Franklin Avenue, her coat pulled tight around her as she made her way home from a late meeting at the studio. She cherished these rare solitary walks when no one asked her for a photograph, a signature, or a smile she didn't have the strength to fake. Tonight the world felt muted, softened by fog, the sky swallowing the usual neon glow that hovered over Hollywood. She felt hidden, almost invisible, almost free. It happened so quickly that even later, when she replayed the moment, she couldn't determine which sound came first. The screech, the shatter, or the silence that followed like the city itself were stunned. Marilyn froze as a figure stumbled into the street at the corner ahead, illuminated only for a flicker by the headlights of a passing car. The man collapsed to the pavement, his coat billowing like a wounded wing. A second vehicle swerved sharply, skidding into a lamppost. Glass scattered, tinkling like falling ice. Marilyn ran before she even thought to. The fog swallowed her steps, her breath, her fear. The man lay face down, unmoving, his hands limp at his sides. She knelt, fingers trembling as she turned him gently. His face was pale, almost grey, a thin line of blood trailing from his temple into the gutter. The street around them pulsed with red reflections from the crashed car's taillight, the glow painting them in a strange, quiet warning. She looked around for help, expecting doors to open, curtains to twitch, something, but every window remained dark, every street empty. The city was watching silently. She reached into her coat for the payphone tokens she always carried and sprinted to the corner booth. Her breath fogged the glass as she dialed for emergency services, her fingers slipping on the cold metal. She gave the street, the cross number, the description. She repeated it twice to make sure they heard her clearly. The operator's tone was flat, distant, assuring her an ambulance would arrive as soon as available. It was a phrase Marilyn heard too many times, usually whispered backstage by stuntmen who waited too long for help, by makeup artists who fainted under the heat of bulbs. But never at midnight, never when she could hear the man behind her struggling for breath. She hurried back to him. He was conscious now, half aware, eyelids fluttering as if he were fighting the weight of drowning sleep. She pressed her coat beneath his head to keep it from the cold pavement. She checked his chest. His breaths were shallow, fast, wrong. She had seen enough injuries in her life to recognize real danger. Whatever had struck him, car, fall, or something worse, had left him unable to wait long. Minutes stretched unnaturally. No sirens, no flashing lights, only the soft hum of a distant city oblivious to the crisis happening in its shadows. A breeze stirred the fog, revealing a black sedan idling slowly at the far end of the road. Its headlights dimmed, its driver unseen. It lingered only a moment before retreating into the mist, leaving Marilyn uneasy. Something felt off, not just the empty street or the delayed ambulance, but the eerie sense that unseen eyes were studying the scene, waiting. She tried to distract herself by focusing on the man's pulse, weak, thready. He whispered something she couldn't understand, but she caught one word, please. His hand clutched hers weakly, then slipped. Panic clawed at her ribs. She called the emergency line again. They gave her the same promise, as soon as possible. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that an entire city district was currently without a single available ambulance. A warehouse fire had pulled every medical crew to Vernon. Dispatchers were overwhelmed, lines jammed, the city fraying under unseen strain. The man beside her didn't have that kind of time. Marilyn scanned the road until she saw the faint glow of approaching headlights, not an ambulance but a cab rolling hesitantly through the fog. She stood and waved, shouting despite the stillness of the city swallowing her voice. The cab slowed, paused, and then disappeared around the corner. She realized the driver, seeing a woman kneeling beside a wounded man in the middle of an empty night street, had simply been too frightened to stop. The man coughed, blood speckling his lips. She couldn't wait anymore. Her mind raced through every option. Carry him, impossible. Run for help, too far. Leave him alone, never. Her eyes landed on the crashed car, a lucky strike if the keys were still inside. She ran to it, yanked the driver's door, and found the keys hanging like a miracle. The cabin smelled of alcohol and smoke. The driver was gone, fled into the night. She started the engine, it sputtered, coughing like the man she was trying to save. She backed it up, swung it around, and pulled as close as possible. She managed to lift him with the kind of strength desperation gives a person. She guided him into the back seat, propping him upright, her breaths coming fast and uneven. Her hands shook as she reached to wipe the blood from his mouth. He tried to speak again, but the words never formed. The fog swallowed the headlights as she climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. She told herself she knew the route to the nearest hospital. She told herself the city wasn't as big or as cruel as it looked tonight. But even as she sped forward, heart hammering, she couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't done with her yet, and that somewhere in the darkness, the black sedan had begun following her again. The road ahead vanished into dense white fog that seemed to swallow her car whole, turning the world into a shifting tunnel of ghostly shapes. The engine rattled beneath her, a damaged animal gasping for breath. Marilyn forced the accelerator down, praying it would hold long enough to reach the hospital. Behind her, the man in the back seat slipped in and out of consciousness, his breaths shallow and arrhythmic, each one a weakening thread that tethered him to the living. The red glow from the taillight cast his face in intermittent pulses, as if the life inside him flickered with the failing bulb. She kept glancing into the rearview mirror, checking on him, checking on the road, checking on the darkness behind. But when her eyes flicked back a third time, her breath caught. The black sedan was back. Far behind but unmistakable, its headlights dimmed almost to nothing, as if it wanted to be seen only enough to let her know it was there. The fog distorted its silhouette, stretching its edges like a shadow too tall for its host. It maintained distance but did not turn away. Marilyn's pulse quickened, tightening her hands on the steering wheel. A city like Los Angeles had its share of night watchers, paparazzi, opportunists, people who made their living in shadows, but this felt different. This felt wrong. She pressed the accelerator harder. The needle wavered as if unsure whether to obey. The car lurched forward and climbed to a speed the failing engine clearly resented. The sedan held its distance. It did not chase. It simply mirrored her, as silent and patient as the fog itself. She turned sharply onto Vine Street, nearly losing control. The rear of the car fishtailed before catching traction. The city should have been alive here, even at this hour, bars emptying, couples drifting home, taxis humming. But tonight it was barren, swallowed in eerie quiet. The fog rose high, blanketing rooftops, drifting low like fingertips brushing asphalt. It softened every sound except the frantic rhythm of her heart. She checked on the man again. His head slumped to the side, lips pale. The coat she'd placed under him had soaked through with blood from a wound she still couldn't fully locate. He was losing too much too fast. A groan escaped him as the car hit a pothole. His hand twitched, reaching instinctively toward the empty air, toward anything that might bring him back to consciousness. Marilyn whispered encouragements he could not hear, leaning back briefly to straighten his posture. She could feel the cold creeping into his skin, the faint tremor of someone fadding. She forced her attention back to the road. The hospital was still several minutes away, too far. She pushed the car harder, praying nothing else would fail. She turned again and found herself on a narrower road than she intended, a side street darkened by a line of dead bulbs overhead. The fog here was thicker, swirling like something alive, something ancient. A weight settled over her as the car drifted deeper into it. The sedan's headlights vanished completely. For a moment she thought she had lost it, but then through the haze the lights reappeared, closer this time, gliding silently like two indifferent eyes. Marilyn's breath hitched. This was no coincidence. She tightened her grip, swallowed her fear, and kept driving. She reminded herself that the real danger was in the back seat, fighting for life, slipping from it. Whoever was behind her would have to wait. Another cough came from the back, weaker than the last. Marilyn reached blindly, brushing her fingers against his shoulder. She felt a sharp tremor beneath her touch. He was crashing. She forced the car to move faster, even as the engine rattled violently, threatening to die at any moment. The headlights behind her brightened suddenly, piercing the fog. The sedan surged forward. Marilyn felt the pressure of its presence like something physical, a cold hand closing around the back of her neck. The sedan advanced another few car lengths, traveling too close now, its intentions no longer subtle. Her instincts screamed. She turned abruptly onto a parallel street, tires shrieking. The sedan missed the turn, sliding past in a streak of blurred metal. Marilyn seized the moment and floored the accelerator, pushing the battered car past its limits. The hospital's sign, usually bright and comforting, glowed faintly through the curtain of fog ahead. Relief washed through her so powerfully her eyes strung, but the fog thickened around her, as if the city sensed her reaching safety and sought one last way to hold her back. The streetlights flickered out. The engine sputtered violently. For one terrifying moment, the car nearly died beneath her hands. She struck the dashboard, begging the failing machine to hold on. The engine coughed, hesitated, then sputtered back to life. The hospital entrance drew closer, 1 block then half a block, until she saw figures standing beneath its awning. She honked the horn desperately. They didn't react. They weren't medical staff. They weren't moving at all. They stood unnaturally still, two silhouettes facing the road, watching her approach. The headlights of the black sedan reappeared behind her. Closer now, moving fast, too fast. Marilyn's breath caught in her throat as she realized the night had turned itself into a trap, and she was driving straight into the center of it, with a dying man depending on her and no ambulance in sight. Marilyn clenched the wheel until her knuckles blanched. Every instinct she had screamed at her to stop, to turn back, to flee the unmoving silhouettes ahead, but the man behind her had no time for caution or fear. His breaths were nearly silent now, his chest rising only with effort, each inhale a battle he was losing. She swerved into the hospital's driveway, the tires skidding on the slick pavement, the fog curling around her like a living thing reluctant to let her pass. The two figures under the awning remained motionless, as if carved from the very shadows that surrounded them. For a moment she feared they were part of the same presence as the black sedan, a silent barrier designed to halt her mission. The sedan's headlights grew brighter in her rearview mirror, cutting through the fog like knives. It was coming fast, accelerating with reckless intent. She felt its hunger, its pursuit, its cold certainty. She made her decision in an instant. She turned the wheel sharply and aimed the failing car not toward the figures, but toward the service ramp leading toward the back of the hospital. The car lurched, rattling as if about to break apart, but surged up the incline and into a narrow loading bay dimly illuminated by a single flickering bulb. She braked hard. The sedan roared into the parking lot behind her but did not follow up the ramp. It slowed. It watched. Its engine idled with a low rumble that reverberated through the concrete. Marilyn threw open her door. Cold night air slammed into her lungs as she raced to the back seat. The man's head hung limp, his breaths barely perceptible. She slid her hands under his shoulders, her coat smeared in his blood, and pulled him toward her. He was dead weight now, a fragile burden that threatened to slip from her grip. She steadied herself, braced her legs, and lifted. Her heart hammered, but she did not stop. The loading bay door was locked. She banged on it with her elbow, knowing no one would hear, knowing she had no time to search for another entrance. Her eyes scanned the wall until she spotted a metal bar beside a small service door, an emergency latch. She slammed her hand down on it. The lock clicked. The door creaked inward with a metallic groan. She pushed through with her shoulder, dragging the man into the dim interior of a hospital corridor. The air inside was warmer but stale, carrying the faint sterile fragrance of cleaning solvents and rubber gloves. She stumbled forward, scanning for any sign of life, any nurse, doctor, orderly, but the corridor was empty. A quiet station desk sat in the middle of the hall, a lone lamp casting a soft cone of light over a stack of charts. She laid the man onto a rolling gurney parked askew beside the desk. Her hands trembled as she reached for the intercom button. Her breath fogged the glass surface. She slammed her palm against it. Nothing. The bulb in the lamp flickered ominously. The building seemed half asleep, half abandoned, as if trapped in the same fog that swallowed the city outside. She spun the gurney herself, pushing it down the corridor, her steps echoing like ghostly footfalls in the hollow hall. She passed shuttered rooms, darkened doorways, and long stretches of silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery buried deep in the building's bones. Finally, she saw movement, a nurse emerging from a doorway, startled, confused. The nurse rushed to help, and in moments the corridor came alive with scrambling footsteps, medical hands moving with trained speed, the sudden swarm of urgency that should have been there from the beginning. Marilyn stepped back as they surrounded the man, guiding the gurney through swinging double doors into a treatment room. The doors closed behind him, sealing him behind a wall of sterile light. She stood alone in the hallway, her breath shallow, her clothes stained, her body trembling as the adrenaline slowly released its grip. For the first time in what felt like hours, she allowed herself to breathe, not calmly but deeply, gratefully, as though each inhale reminded her she was still standing. She stepped toward a window at the end of the corridor and looked out into the night. The fog pressed against the glass like a living curtain. The black sedan was gone. The two silhouettes she had seen earlier were gone. The street was empty once again, but the sense of presence, unseen, silent, watchful, lingered in the edges of her mind. She waited for the nurse to return with an update, but minutes passed, then more. She couldn't remain still. She retraced her steps to the main lobby, where the night staff had finally returned to their stations. She looked around for any clues, any signs that someone had witnessed what happened outside, but the lobby felt strangely untouched by the urgency she had experienced. A soft murmur of movement from behind her pulled her attention back to the corridor. A doctor approached, his expression solemn yet relieved. The man she had brought in was alive, barely but alive. He had lost a dangerous amount of blood and might have died had she arrived even minutes later. The words settled over her, heavy and quiet. She felt the tremble in her hands again. She stepped aside, letting the weight of the night wash over her. It was then she saw something else, the faint reflection of her own face in the lobby window, pale and haunted but standing tall. She realized she had crossed a line she previously thought she could never reach, not just stepping into danger, not just acting without thought. She had taken responsibility for a stranger's life, in a night when the world had seemed determined to abandon them both. As she stepped outside again, the fog had finally begun to lift. Streetlights flickered back to life, illuminating the road in soft, forgiving gold. The hospital's entrance, the same place where the two figures had stood earlier, was empty now. A discarded cigarette smoldered near a bench, still warm. Evidence someone had been there watching. She walked slowly down the steps, letting the chill of the air clear her thoughts. A paramedic truck rolled past, lights dimmed, finally freed from whatever crisis had consumed the city earlier. She watched it until it vanished into the brightening haze. She felt the night shifting around her, releasing its grip. She knew the black sedan could return someday. She knew the shadows of Lowe's angels held more mysteries than she could count. But she also knew something deeper, that when the city failed, when the systems built to protect people crumbled, she had refused to stand by. She had chosen to act, and somewhere in a hospital room behind her, a man lived because of it. She took one final breath of the thinning fog, then walked toward the rising dawn, her silhouette cutting through the morning light like a survivor of a battle no one else had seen. The night had tried to swallow her whole, but she had broken through. And though she never learned the man's name, nor why the sedan had followed her, nor why the figures had stood silently in the mist, she carried the truth with her as she disappeared down the street. Even in the darkest hours, she remained her own light.